Awesome. So my clock is reading 3:30, so we will go ahead and get started and kind of catch people up as they trickle in. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zach Ames. I'm with the Ohio STEM Learning Network, and I'm helping manage this year's design challenge, which is the hashtag STEM Builds Design Challenge, STEM Builds Ohio Design Challenge, excuse me. Today, we are very excited to bring you Rich Granger and DriveOhio / FlyOhio and all of the initiatives that they have coming up in Ohio. That to kind of help situate you and engage you towards this upcoming design challenge. As we get started, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, you can say your name, what school you're at, and what grade level you teach. That would be absolutely perfect. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rich and let you get started.
Great. Thank you, Zach, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Excited to be here. And today we're going to talk about FlyOhio and all things smart mobility. I've been presenting most of the day, so hopefully my voice hangs in there. And let's get started. And as Zach said, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and also start throwing questions in there. It'll be a little tough for me to jump in there, but I'm sure Zach can flag me down with any questions. We've got probably an hour's worth of content here, but we can skip over some content to leave time for questions, discussions, ideas. So we're very flexible in how we approach our time over the next hour together here. So thanks for joining. And as Zach said, my name is Rich Granger. I'm with DriveOhio. I'll explain in a minute what that means and who we are. And as he said, we're supporting, once again, the Ohio STEM Learning Network Design Challenge. This year's STEM Builds Ohio focused on infrastructure. It's a natural fit for a group like DriveOhio and FlyOhio. We're part of the Ohio Department of Transportation, and infrastructure is our business. So we're glad to help with this. And you can see here, I'll bring this challenge question up a few times as we talk today. This is kind of the focus challenge question for this year's challenge. Some of you may have seen this before, may have already started thinking about it. As we go through this, I'm going to start by giving some examples of what we mean when we say smart mobility and what we mean when we talk about all these advanced air mobility technologies. And then we'll give a few examples of how we've translated that in the higher education setting with an innovation challenge. And then we'll close in between that. We'll have some perspectives on careers and career opportunities. And then towards the end, we'll translate all this into how you might apply this within this year's challenge. Now, because I may end up sharing a few videos, I'm going to quickly stop sharing and reshare so I pick up the audio. So pardon my rookie Zoom mistake on that one. Let me fix that and start it again. All right. Try that one more time. Sorry about that. Okay. So what we're going to do first is just talk a little bit about smart mobility and where this technology is headed, especially with air mobility. And I like to start with some history. And so let's start with a historical quote from Garrett Morgan. And for those that may not recognize that name, in a minute, I'll explain who he is or who he was. But he liked to say, if you can be the best, why not be the best? And I think that's a great message. So let's start with some transportation history. Let's go back a little over 100 years ago. I gave away the answer. Sometimes with students, we might ask first, what do you think this is? This is Fountain Square in Cincinnati in the early 1900s. So what modes of transportation do you see? We've got streetcars, you've got some horse and buggies, you've got pedestrians, probably some bicycles in there. So at that time, what now seems routine may have seemed very new. Not too long after that, here's Broad and High Street in Columbus. Similar type of picture there. You might start to see one or two motorized vehicles, maybe almost. I think I see at least one in that picture. No scooters, not yet. Here's 1917 in Athens, Southeast Ohio. So now you're seeing cars, lots of cars, still some horses and other things. And you're starting to see, well, parking's become a thing now. I mean, there was always probably horse parking, but now you've got, where are we going to park these cars? And then maybe a few years after that, it started to look like this. Cars, trains, streetcars, horses, people, you name it. How are we going to untangle this mess that we've created? Enter Garrett Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, an inventor from Ohio, from the Cleveland area, who held the patent on this traffic signal shown in the middle, the 3-mode traffic signal that had a few different modes for different vehicles. And so this was the dominant traffic signal until fully electrified signals came through. So great innovation here in the state of Ohio with transportation. Here are some other innovators of transportation. The Wright Brothers from Ohio, probably one of the more famous examples. This is one of the world's first airfields near the Dayton area at Huffman Prairie Flying Field. It's a National Historic Site. Notice the date there, 1904. At the same time all these cars were starting to develop, we had airplanes being developed at the same time. There's a parallel to what's happening right now with technology. So we'll come back to that. So the world's first airfield, or one of the world's first, they shared it with livestock. So the early days of what we now call air traffic control included getting the cattle out of the way so the airplane could come in and take another landing. So the Wright brothers did their very first flight in North Carolina. They did all their design work here in Ohio, and they came back to Ohio to build their business. So other than that short trip to North Carolina, they did so much work here. We're still to this day proud of what they did. So going into the 1940s, you had this idea of air taxis. Zooming into the future, what is that going to look like? Well, 2015 was already here. Where's my flying car? Everybody who's seen Back to the Future thinks about that, right? I mean, this was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. The flying car, look at this thing. It's not even here yet, right? 2015 was when that movie was supposed to happen. So what is here today? Well, with DriveOhio and FlyOhio, we're twin initiatives of the Ohio Department of Transportation. We're the state center for smart mobility. And when we say smart mobility, we mean automated, connected, and electric vehicles and infrastructure on the ground and in the air. That's, I guess, a fancy way of saying self-driving cars, drones. Those are some popular terms that are out there right now. Any technology that has to do with that space and electric vehicles too, that's where we work. That's the type of thing that we're doing every day and thinking about how our infrastructure is ready for all those technologies. So what we're going to do now is talk a little more about this drones and this advanced air mobility and other terms. What do we mean when we're talking about this? And what are some examples, some real examples of how this is being used today in Ohio and across the country? So this, there's a lot of words on here, but what you see are different examples of different types of air mobility technologies. Drones are in there, yes, these small ones that you might use with a camera on it to do some inspections or just for recreation. You've got package delivery starting to be experimented with. There's the air taxi, the flying car. And then on the left side is the infrastructure to support it. And that's why we're here today. We're talking about how advanced air mobility, like what you see on this slide, is going to figure into the future of the infrastructure here in Ohio, which is what this STEM Builds Ohio Design Challenge is all about. So here's even more to think about. This is meant to be kind of messy because there's just a lot of technology involved here and a lot of terminology involved too. Those letters in the middle, electric vertical takeoff and landing, EVTOL. Only an engineer could cook up an acronym as goofy as that. But this is what they're starting to call this stuff. And I'm allowed to pick on engineers, by the way. I guess I used to be one, so I don't feel too bad about it. So eVTOL is what the industry might call it sometimes. What does that mean? Well, think about a helicopter. Right now, it's got those two, that rotor at the top, and it takes off from a helipad and off it goes. Well, these new aircraft look a little different. They still can take off vertically, and then they can go pretty fast. They're electric, and sometimes they'll be short takeoff and landing instead of vertical. So what is all this? What does it mean? Here's maybe what it starts to look like. Different types of aircraft enabling different types of trips that maybe you couldn't take before. Maybe for package delivery, eventually for movement of people. This was an illustration that NASA came up with because they're in this space. Anything in the airspace, you've got NASA, you've got the Federal Aviation Administration, you've got the Air Force, all coordinating and working together on this technology that's still being figured out. What are some of the headlines right now in this space? Here's a company called Kitty Hawk that's partnering with the state of Ohio. We'll talk about them in a little bit more. They've got this air taxi they're developing. Their founder, Sebastian Thrun, was also one of the founders of the self-driving car movement several years ago. So you've got some really interesting technologies being developed and tested. Here's one of these package delivery vehicles, much bigger than one of those small drones you might see. This I call this almost like a flying Ford Transit van or something like that. I mean, this is a bigger example. A company called Beta Technologies partnering with UPS for these. There's that acronym again, eVTOLs. These are headlines that you're seeing almost once a month, if not once a week. You're starting to see headlines like this if you look for them. This was some testing we did in the state of Ohio with a small business called Vertex, focused on organ delivery. So when you think about what happens when you need to get ready for an organ transplant and something needs to move very quickly, that's a very ideal use case for a medical drone like this to get something from point A to point B very quickly. And you start to get into these questions of, well, how does that really work? Like, who flies it? Who's the pilot? Do they have to be able to see it the whole time? What if they need to go a longer distance? How does that work? These are the types of things we're starting to test out here in Ohio. And I'll kind of keep telling some stories here to explain what it is we're doing and how we're answering all those questions that are important to be asked. Here's another headline. Kroger has started delivering groceries with drones in Ohio. This was a headline not too long ago. They partnered with a company called Telegrid through their Drone Express division, and that's actual footage of the real system that's in Centerville, Ohio. So there it is, not too far from Columbus, in the Dayton region, kind of in between Cincinnati and Dayton. And so you may ask yourself, viewer of WKRC Local 12 News Story, why is Kroger flying delivery drones in Centerville, Ohio? How did they pick Centerville of all the places in the United States? Well, it does happen that Kroger is headquartered in Cincinnati, so they wanted to be close to their home base, but still, why Centerville? Why that area? So I'll get you an answer, but let's talk a little bit about the testing that's led up to that moment when Kroger made that announcement. So the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, has a program called Agility Prime. The purpose of this program is to get all these aircraft certified and ready to fly. So this is an airworthiness certification program. And it's reminiscent of what the Defense Department did several years ago with these urban challenges and driving, self-driving grand challenges. They made big investments maybe 15 years ago, and now the companies that are doing all that development of self-driving cars started off on those challenges. Well, it's happening again, and this time the Air Force is funding it, and guess where they're doing a lot of the testing? In Ohio. We're now looking at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base close to Dayton and Springfield-Beckley Airport nearby, not too far from Centerville. So you can start to see maybe where I'm going with the answer to that question of why Kroger picked that location. So with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and all the assets they have there, they partnered with the Ohio Department of Transportation to develop systems that could enable this type of testing. This is the Sky Vision system. Here in April of 2019, you see the unveiling of this system. There's Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and several, you've got the Ohio Department of Transportation Director, Dr. Jack Marchbanks in the front row there, others assembled to show off this system that was co-developed with the Air Force to do air traffic control in the low altitude. Well, what does that mean? Well, when you're talking about flying a bunch of drones, I mean, when you've got one or two and the pilot can see them, that's probably manageable. When you've got 10 or 100 or more, and maybe the pilot can't always see where they're at, now you've got an issue. And it's not unlike what an air traffic controller does today in an airport for regular airplanes, traditional aircraft, but now they're getting smaller and more mobile, and there could be more of them. How are we going to manage that airspace? That's what the Sky Vision system does. It's a pretty unique system. It's almost one of a kind. It's right here in Ohio, and it's home based at Springfield-Beckley Airport. Here's the Sky Vision system with Telegrid. So we're now all the way back to the Kroger story. How did Kroger get to the point of making that announcement? Well, first, Telegrid and Drone Express division tested these drones with the Sky Vision system. You can see the packages there. They can hold about 5 pounds, which is actually quite a bit of, a typical small load of groceries that you might have. And so that's where they tested. This was in 2019, I believe, before that announcement in 2020 with Kroger. So now Springfield Beckley Airport has had a groundbreaking with Beta. Remember Beta? Earlier we showed them with UPS. It's that same company has broken ground and installed a charging station at Springfield Airport. This will charge electric aircraft. It will also charge electric vehicles on the ground. Now we're getting back into infrastructure to support all of this. I'm a pilot for an electric aircraft. I land, where am I going to recharge? Here's your answer. And we're building a network of these. There's going to be one put in at Akron Airport, and they're talking about a national network of these charging stations for aircraft. Some more headlines. Here was a News 5 Cleveland story that gave a nice recap of the story I've just been telling you about everything that's happening and will be happening. There's ODOT Director Marchbanks again in one of the simulators that's now on site at Springfield. This is becoming really a national center for all this type of activity. It's quite impressive. And to recognize that, here was a headline from just 2 months ago. Springfield was selected for some significant funding from the Defense Department to build out this Advanced Air Mobility Center of Excellence. So now this is just further validating that Springfield, not too far from Huffman Prairie Flying Field that I showed you that picture from over 100 years ago, in that same general neighborhood, it's happening again. 100 years later, Ohio is witnessing the rebirth of aviation, the rebirth of flight, and it's all happening right in our backyard. Here's what it's going to look like when that facility opens up in 2023. I think is when it'll be completely ready. But some of that infrastructure is already there. That landing pad shown on the left there, some might call it a vertiport. Once we get the FAA to sign off on that terminology, that's what we'll officially call it. Until then, it might be called an elevated landing pad. These are being built already, and we're going to have a major event there next week with more testing happening. Let's talk about some other infrastructure around the state. In September, Ohio cut the ribbon on the world's most connected highway, the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor. This includes connected vehicle testing, but it also includes air mobility testing. This is in central Ohio. This picture was taken at the Transportation Research Center in East Liberty, which sits along that 33 corridor and connects East Liberty with Marysville and Dublin. And we've got, in addition to connected vehicle testing that allows these vehicles to communicate with each other, we're doing air mobility testing. Here's a radar that was installed on top of ODOT headquarters near downtown Columbus. This radar, along with some of the other radars along that 33 corridor, we're using that to help do air traffic control for all these drones to figure out how they will handle their deliveries and how we will coordinate all this air traffic, especially for medical applications and lots of other examples that you can only start to imagine. NASA, we're also working with NASA. So as I mentioned earlier, anything dealing with airspace, you've got a lot of different stakeholders involved. So NASA has an advanced air mobility national campaign that they're working on. They put out a call for collaboration. The state of Ohio put in an application and we were selected to participate in this collaborative activity. So we're doing work that will support the National Advanced Air Mobility Campaign. What you see here are 3 phases of activities that we're just getting started on. In the next year, we'll keep building out that activity around Springfield Airport. In 2023, we're going to connect Dayton and Columbus. And then into 2024, we're going to connect the so-called 3 Cs, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, and we'll pull in Athens. And of course, Dayton will still be connected as well. We're building the statewide network of advanced air mobility flights. There's Kitty Hawk again. We talked about them earlier, one of their aircraft. They'll be a major part of this program. There are others that we've partnered with. We're talking with hospitals all around the state with our partners at Jobs Ohio about use cases for this technology. It's super exciting. So we're also studying how this will affect jobs, how this will affect the economy in the state of Ohio. Our partners at Crown Consulting, Nexa Capital Partners, and the University of Cincinnati, not too long ago, completed an economic impact study that looked at all those corridors you see on the map, really all around the state, to think about where are we going to send all these things? How are they going to work? What are they going to do? Here's some of what they came up with. Look at those numbers, a $13 billion industry for the state of Ohio over the next 25 years by 2045. Creating or affecting over 15,000 jobs. And I see some students out there. I see all of you. So hello. You will be working on this by the time you're in high school or beyond. This is a multi-year, long-term development. And so look at that number in the middle there, 81 vertiports. I talked about those vertiports earlier. What does that mean? These are just like where a helicopter takes off and lands right now. Same idea with a vertiport. That's the infrastructure that supports the takeoff and landing for these aircraft. We're going to need 81 of those vertiports by 2045. But look at this. It may be a little hard to see, but what those bars showing on the right side there are the number of vertiports in each metro area around Ohio in 5-year increments. Those first few numbers there in phase 1, by 2024, pick an area like Columbus, 9 vertiports by 2024. It's already 2021. I mean, how are we going to get this figured out, right? If we don't start building these things, then we're not going to hit those numbers that we talked about with economic impact. So we're asking ourselves why, when, where, and how are we going to develop these vertiports in Ohio over the next 25 years? And guess who has the answers? Your students, other students that we've worked with. This is where we're crowdsourcing these ideas to ask these questions, because any of the experts in this field are figuring it out as we go. The ones who are experts in this field will tell you we don't have all the answers yet. And yet, the faster we can figure out the answers, the faster the benefits will be, and the sooner the technology can be deployed. Because a lot of these technology developers are telling us that the hardware, the systems, they're pretty much ready. It's the regulations and policy and the business cases that need to catch up. So that's where we need your help, your imagination to say, how can we use these aircraft? As I tell you what they can do, how can you imagine ways to use them, where to put them, where to plug in? All those questions are important to us, and that's why we're so excited to be part of this design challenge this year. So let's talk about talent. Let's talk about the future of our workforce and the future of work and what that looks like. And the future of work is learning. That's what Heather McGowan says, and I agree with her. This is showing the way things maybe used to work. You go through school, you work, and you don't really maybe learn all that much while you're working, and then you retire. Well, maybe that's exaggerating a little bit, but anyway, down at the bottom, it feels much more chaotic these days, right? You start working, and then you learn a little more, and then you work some more and you learn some more. You know, when I started working, these mobile devices weren't even in existence, and now they're all over the place, right? So learning, constant learning is something that's why we support design challenges like this, because we know that it's so important. Here's an eye chart that shows you all the different pieces of the smart mobility puzzle on the ground and in the air. Look at all these jobs. In the middle, you've got engineers, technicians, construction, utilities, city planners, cybersecurity, business, law. Out on the edges, you've got different variations of commercial drivers, pilots, automotive technicians, aircraft maintenance, repair and overhaul, automotive manufacturing, aerospace manufacturing. There's so many jobs involved with all this technology I've been talking about. That's why this is so important to us. What are we going to do to make sure that these jobs are developed and stay here in Ohio throughout the next 25 years and beyond? So we're gonna bring some perspectives in here on what it's like to work in this field. I'm introducing Helen. She's a program analyst and drone pilot at the Ohio UAS Center. And I'm introducing Kenya. He's not here on the call today with us, but he's a workforce innovation intern at DriveOhio, supporting us on a lot of our STEM outreach programs, much like what I was doing a few minutes ago here at the PAST Foundation today. Let me see who's on the line. I don't know, was Helen able to join today?
It doesn't look like she's on the phone currently, Rich. So if you want to go ahead and skip forward to RJ's bit, we'll see if Helen's able to join us a little bit later.
Sure, and along the way, what I can do, yeah, she had sent me a note that she's out in the field doing the work that she's doing. So I think what I'm gonna do is I've got this video queued up. So I think I'm gonna use that video to share her perspective, and then we will move into our discussion with RJ after that. So let me get that video up, and if it works, just give me a thumbs up. Just take a second.
Helen McCreary. I work for the Ohio UAS Center. I am the UAS program analyst.
My name's Kenya Gray. I am a workforce and innovation intern at DriveOhio. I'm also a fifth-year student at Ohio State University.
I think a lot of people start off thinking they're going to do one thing and then just sort of come into this industry in a weird way, because it's brand new, like especially drones, but like smart mobility in general. Everything is new. The industry is brand new.
When I first came to Ohio State, I was actually a civil engineer for the first 2.5, 3 years of my collegiate career. So I actually started out as a bridge inspector with the RTA, which is like Cleveland's version of CODA here in Columbus. I wanted to switch it up a little bit, do something like more innovative. So when I came to DriveOhio, I was like, this is the perfect opportunity.
I came into this job sort of a roundabout way. I was an archaeologist, and I did my master's degree on archaeological prospection, which is remote sensing, and I started using a drone for archaeology and really got into it. Then I came back and got a job at ODOT working for the UAS Center. Half of the UAS Center's job is to prepare Ohio for smart mobility, for drone taxis, drone delivery, medical delivery using drones.
So what me and my supervisor, Rich Granger, do is we go around to different schools around the state pre-COVID, and we would basically have workshops where we would bring our Autobots to them. It's pretty nice to do that, just to see kids and be interactive with them, because that's something that my education lacked, just to give those kids the opportunity to do something that I never had the opportunity to do, and that's pretty important to me.
We have all sorts of different drones. We have massive drones that we use to carry magnetometers around to look for abandoned wellheads. We have this drone, which we use. This is our bridge inspection drone. It's got really high-level obstacle avoidance systems. Everything that we can do with drones makes everyone's jobs easier and safer.
It's all about being creative and being innovative. I've started a couple projects at DriveOhio, as well as the fact that I've been a part of a couple projects that I never thought would even be possible.
I guess if you wanted to get into this field, it would be great to start off by buying a little drone, flying it around, getting used to thinking about the world in that way, thinking about it from above. When you have a drone in the air and you look down and suddenly like, wow, everything looks different. I'm above it and I can see everything from a new perspective. It will change how we build roads.
You'll probably see more autonomous cars, whether it's just Amazon or taxis or Uber of some sort or Lyft. And I also predict that more people will be more willing to actually use these technologies, because a lot of people are actually afraid of it now. They think that, well, a car driving itself, there's no way it's going to be better than me at driving, but the reality is it's a computer. It doesn't make as many mistakes as humans do, so that's where I think we'll be. Just more autonomous vehicles on the road for sure, and people will be more comfortable with it.
Imagine not having to take a road to work. You go in the most direct way possible. Go to the nearest Vertiport and you get in your drone and you fly from Canal Winchester to downtown Columbus. It is an incredible field for kids to get into. There are going to be a ton of jobs in the near future, tons of jobs in this sort of realm with using drones to complete tasks, to do survey, to do bridge inspection. There are already tons of jobs in it, and I think that's only going to grow.
So you heard it here first from two of our rock stars on the team. I couldn't have said it better as far as the opportunities, the excitement, and back to this design challenge. What's your idea? You heard predictions from Helen and Kenya there about what they think might be on the horizon. What do you think? I mean, that's what this challenge is all about, is imagining a future and then starting to build it. That's, STEM Builds Ohio is what this year's challenge is all about. So as we think about how to take this question and how to start shaping all this information I've just kind of thrown on the table here, how do we turn that into a design challenge question? So I'm going to introduce my next guest, who RJ Sargent from the University of Cincinnati, from the Cincinnati Innovation District, who helped us to answer this question. How are we going to build 81 vertiports across Ohio by 2045? Now, I don't mean to imply we have the whole answer yet, but we're working on it. And the way that we worked on that was through this FlyOhio Vertiport Innovation Challenge. I'm going to just briefly set up what I mean by that, and then I'm going to ask RJ to jump in with just his perspective on innovation challenges, what our experience was here, and how it all works. So I want to introduce you to somebody else too. This is Mai, and she led the winning team at our very first FlyOhio Vertiport Innovation Challenge earlier this year. You can see she's really excited there when she found out she won. That was, they had this outstanding concept that tied into the healthcare system in the Cincinnati Innovation District. We've got all sorts of pictures here that show some of the examples. And we've done a much bigger, more complex challenge since then. So I think this is a good time to ask RJ to jump in and let's just have a chat for a few minutes. RJ, welcome, and would you like to introduce yourself and share some perspectives?
Sure thing. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so as Rich mentioned, RJ Sargent, I work at the University of Cincinnati in a group called the Office of Innovation that is helping to form the Cincinnati Innovation District. And in the Cincinnati Innovation District, we're all about talent and ultimately trying to work with partner companies, connect them with talent at the university, talent in the district, so collaborations between partners and research endeavors as well. And these innovation challenges are an example of one way that we do that. So they're short sprints, essentially, usually with multidisciplinary teams of UC students. In some cases, we go beyond, as Rich will show in a couple slides, I think. But the general principle is to give the students a challenge prompt, give them some resources that they can reference, provide them access to knowledgeable coaches, and then help guide them along the way, usually over the course of either a couple days or a full week, to develop a concept and try to articulate it in a way to a panel of judges that can help them to win. So we incentivize the students to participate, recognizing that their time is valuable, and then there are always prizes at the end for the winning teams as well. So it's a really fun and rewarding experience for me, but the students have given us glowing feedback as well, that they have an opportunity to work on real world problems, that they get to connect with people in industries, and that at the end of the day, they feel like they're contributing to this broader ecosystem.
Thanks, RJ. And yeah, I mean, with that first challenge, I've been showing some of the pictures from the very first one. I mean, maybe I can add a comment on each one, and I'd love to hear your perspective too. I mean, this was the winning team here, the hub, I think they called it. You can see and what's fascinating here is this was, I mean, of course, we're talking university students here, and we'll be translating it to K-12 in a few minutes, but I never sell any students short. I just came out of a room with a bunch of high school students that were asking me questions that I literally had no idea how to answer them. So they're always just running right over my head. So anyway, these renderings were done in a matter of 24 hours in some cases. Now, maybe they did a little brainstorming beforehand, but we didn't give them the real challenge until the day of. Here are some other renderings that one of the student teams did, thinking about how to integrate it into an interchange there potentially. This was fascinating. They were pitching reuse of Lunken Airfield in the Cincinnati region. So there was just all sorts of very tangible ideas that came out of that. Before we jump into the most recent challenge, RJ, any reflections from that first one that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think one of the neat things here is and as we'll get into in just a second, is it really set the stage for growth. So in this challenge, the students were really focused on trying to develop a vertiport or network of vertiports that could serve the Cincinnati Innovation District. And we left things kind of open to see where their imagination would go, gave them some background information on use cases, but it was really exciting to see sort of the variation of ideas that each of the students came up with. And as Rich said, this was basically kicked off on Friday, and a couple of days later it was wrapped up, and the students had very little time, and I was just blown away by not only the quality of ideas, but the quality of the execution that they brought to the table. And as Rich said, never sell the students short. They always amaze me in every one of these challenges.
For sure. And, that is, I think you brought up one of the challenges there is, when you set these kind of activities up, you want to be specific, but not too specific. There's a little bit of art and science to it, right? I mean, we kept it kind of open-ended enough, but not so much that they're like, tunneling under the underground with, hyperloops and other stuff. I mean, we had to put some constraints on there, right? Is that usually how it goes?
Exactly. Yeah. And Rich, what you don't know is one of the teams that in the second challenge actually had a Hyperloop solution integrated with their Vertiport. And I thought that was going to be the idea that they pitched. They ended up focusing more on the Vertiport side, but it was funny working with them. And that's one of the fun things. I mean, these follow the typical creative process, right? So they start with some ideas, they start to flush things out, and good ideas start to emerge through the process, and then they build sort of the details around that. But early on, one of the teams was trying to send these drones underground. But it's great. Like, it's great for them to explore that and then kind of bring it back to the core of the challenge and further develop the ideas. Yeah. Do you want to set this up, or do you want me to dive in?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know which of us was the mad scientist, or maybe we both were, where we said, well, that was fun. That first challenge we did was in March of 2021. So heading into the fall this year in October, we said, well, let's go bigger. And when we say bigger, I mean, let's pull in the whole state. Let's pull in a bunch of industry sponsors, even more than the last time. We ended up with 6 different universities. So RJ, tell the audience what we did and what was the method to our madness here.
Yeah, so I really see the first one that we did in March is sort of our pilot, taking this general concept of vertiports and leveraging student talent to come up with ideas that can help serve it. But it was slightly theoretical, and so that was good. It was a really good exercise. It informed us, and we got to see the power of this type of approach, and wanted to take that and then kind of ground it a little bit more in reality. So as the NASA Advanced Air Mobility Campaign started to coalesce, as we got the economic impact study data out, it's like, okay, well, we have some things that we can start to dive into and use that as some of our framework. And so really tried to make opportunity and started to look across the state and say, okay, these University of Cincinnati students are awesome. We want to continue to work with them, but we don't need, like, there are great ideas all across the state. So as you saw from the list, like literally from southwest to southeast to northeast to northwest and in the middle, right? So we really connected across the entire state. There were 30 different companies that participated and played a role in this challenge. And again, this was grounded a little bit more in reality and really using the backbone of the economic impact study and sort of the different phases that are predicted for how vertiports will be rolled out across both use cases as well as different areas of the state. And so in this case, the students were asked to focus on the region that they're in for their university, and understand how we can integrate smart mobility solutions on the ground with these vertiports and ultimately networks of vertiports to basically unlock the magic that can happen in that phase. So it was really interesting. And as Rich said, it's always this balance of making the prompt wide enough that you can inspire creativity and a breadth of solutions, but not so wide that the students are lost and don't know where to head. Also, if you make it too narrow, then you kind of restrict their creativity and you end up getting a lot of similarity in the solution. So I think there's a lot of art and craft in how you come up with this challenge prompt. And sort of our way to find the middle was to keep the challenge statement, as you see there, pretty broad, but then put in parameters of, hey, pick a phase, pick a use case to drive some of the specificity and help basically create some guide rails for the students as they were doing their creation phase of this.
And so, we'll give in a minute here a few of showcase some of the results that came out of this awesome challenge. This one was a little longer. It went over a 2-week period where we had a divisional round where everybody competed for a week, and we had a down select, and we had 4 finalists. And I know that we're going to translate all this back to the K-12 setting. This is, of course, higher education. So it's, you can see there's some extra complexity in here, but we wanted to share this as just sort of a case study of, at least at that higher ed level, this was how we took those pieces along the bottom there, the NASA challenge, the economic impact study with a lot of early emphasis on medical package delivery, and say, look, if we had student teams telling us, I'm going to have a flying taxi flying around, Columbus or Cincinnati or wherever in the next 2 years, this is our chance to say, I love your creativity and ambition, but maybe you need to go 10 or 15 years out on that one. So maybe I'll flip through some of the results here. And RJ, if you want to add some comments on the outcomes. And I'll say this was our winner, Sinclair College. Mighty Sinclair from the Dayton region was the winner for our first statewide competition. This was just an outstanding balanced concept that pulled in lots of different distribution centers from the U.S. Postal Service was their idea. You can see some maps, some renderings, some images, and just very practical, very like a ready to, not quite shovel ready, but almost ready to go concept. And, any of these could serve, I think, as launching points for K-12 students to get inspired by, if you wanted to. That's one way you could use some of this information. RJ, what would you add about the winning team? I'm sure I missed some superlatives there.
Yeah, and we'll click through some of the others, but I think first off, I was really excited to see Sinclair beat some of the giants across the state, like Ohio State, University of Cincinnati, and others. And so it was a nice little bit of an underdog story, but they crushed it. And I think part of their success was they were really grounded in reality. So you can see from some of the images there, they understood the area that they were innovating in. They understood how they could leverage existing infrastructure to move quickly, but then other opportunities to expand, convert things, and really took every element into consideration. So I thought that was it was really easy to hear their idea and see how it could become reality.
Agree. So I did my best to capture most of the student ideas, so we'll flip through some of the others just to give you a sense of the variety of ideas. The team from Ohio State made it to the finals, and they were picked as the best overall presentation. There was just a real crisp delivery and the way that they told their story. They were thinking about Kroger as a potential user, and this was a map they kind of developed for the Columbus region.
The only thing I'd add to that is one thing I really appreciated with that group was they knew the limitations of their idea. So they had a good sense of, okay, here's what we can do now and the potential that we see, but something has to happen in order to unlock that future. And I liked that it wasn't just an idea where all things are possible, but it was grounded in reality, recognizing what the hurdles are, but also identifying, hey, this is something that we have time to solve if we want to make this a bigger idea. So.
That's a great point. I agree. Let's see, here was there were several teams from University of Cincinnati. This team made it to the finals. Vertiport had some renderings there of some concepts and different locations around the region. I thought there was some great specific creativity on their concept in particular there. And here was another University of Cincinnati team. I was very impressed with the way that they reached out to as we say sometimes, get out of the building and talk to users. They got this perspective from somebody who's a EMS tech in Cincinnati saying, look, delivery of blood transfusions, it's a big deal. And it's literally life-saving. And sometimes if you got traffic issues or safety issues with a fast-moving vehicle on the ground, if you could bring things into the air, boy, that would really change things from a use case perspective. And we're also hearing it that just from a business case for medical is also very compelling. So that was at least one thing that jumped out to me for this team.
Yeah, the only other build that I would have there is, I think for this team, it really underscored the importance of being able to tell your story well. I think that this team might have had some of the best insights, especially with the primary research they did, but they didn't quite get the story across as powerfully as they could have, or else they may have won. But I thought it was really, really great work. And again, they had a week to develop their idea and have the divisional pitch, and then they were chosen to go to the finals and had an opportunity to refine their idea. But really, really strong idea and great work by that team.
Yeah, RJ, I'm glad you mentioned storytelling, because I really want to emphasize that when we talk about STEM career opportunities, and really when I talk with my daughter about it, she always reminds me of STEAM, right? Put the arts in there too. There is so much space for everybody that's interested in this with whatever talents you bring to the table. And I said earlier, I've got some engineering background, so I feel okay picking on engineers sometimes. Some engineers are terrible storytellers. You just don't know what they're talking about. And so if you have a balanced team with someone who's really good at conveying messages with empathy and clarity, that's just as important as a good technical solution. Sometimes I'd say it's more important. So that's where we try to make sure that everyone feels included and part of the conversation. And so, yeah, I'll just emphasize that storytelling piece is super important. This was our team from Ohio University. One of their great observations was just there's all these airfields and airports and facilities around not just Ohio, but really around the country that are going underutilized. Some of the specific fields they pointed out, one was maybe from the early 1900s or mid 20th century, and how can we repurpose these, reimagine these, whether it's for agriculture, for healthcare, emergency services, cargo delivery, just sort of an opportunity just right in front of us. And with the state of Ohio having so many county airports and such, I thought that was a really great insight that they built on in their presentation. Akron. Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, Rich, I don't know if this is a good stopping point, but if you get to one after you kind of display what all of these other universities did, Gabe in the chat asked a question regarding how you would kind of pitch this to a group of middle schoolers, or I would also say elementary school students, just since it seems kind of high level, just kind of bringing it back down to a usable level for a middle school or an elementary school educator. But you can go ahead and finish your introduction of all the universities, and then I'm sure there'll be some time afterwards to explain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just to kind of quickly round out the examples here, Toledo, Akron, you can see again, they're kind of going local and talking about some very specific examples, use cases. RJ, unless there's anything you want to add on those particulars, we can kind of go into some Q&A. I'll just kind of dwell on this slide, I guess. Yeah, I can start, and RJ, feel free to jump in. I mean, to me, it's an important question, and it's really kind of a good segue into the next part of our discussion. So I'll start to answer it, and then hopefully with some of the other material we have, we'll continue to answer that question, because that's really why we're here today, right? So one thought that comes to mind is taking everything we've just presented here and picking out just a few pieces that you think would resonate with those younger students, and add some additional constraints or guardrails. And so, one of the reasons we want to share all these regional examples is because I know we've got, I think, a statewide audience here with us today. So you may have some inspiration in your neighborhood based on something you've seen or heard here today. And so then you could pick out an idea and say, well, either inspired by this or take this idea and go a little further, but I'm only going to ask you to solve this piece of it. So, I'm going to ask you a more focused or specific question. That's one strategy. RJ, I don't know if you had thoughts to add.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. So for the university students, we kept things pretty broad, and they had to answer questions from planning and design, from the actual idea for the vertiport and the network and the cargo or medical use case, and they had to build the business model. So there were a lot of things that we asked them to answer in a short time. I think if you can help make some of those decisions, then it becomes much more manageable for a younger audience. And think about their skills and where they could be best be suited. I think the general concept, so you could give some parameters like, okay, we're going to have 3 vertiports. They're going to be located here, here, and here, something to that extent, and then let them explore what those would do and why. So I think there's basically reduce the variables that they have to play with, but allow and try to create a field of creativity for them to be able to explore and bring fun and passion and good new ideas into it.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking what RJ said there, speaking from the lens of somebody who's seen a lot of different design challenges, I would definitely at those lower grades prioritize that creativity and kind of get to more broad ideas that aren't necessarily practical in a realistic sense, but really start to spread that idea and get to that next level of just, this can happen. This is incredibly innovative, might not have a super deep basis within a lot of educational studies or practicality, but we really like to see those super innovative strategies that students can really kind of get behind and get excited about.
I appreciate all that input. And I think I saw another sort of maybe related or similar question in the chat about like an elevator pitch, how to translate all this. I am going to get to that. So we did craft something that we think will translate into the challenge setting. So let's, I think if we keep pressing ahead here, we will get to that. RJ, any other thoughts you wanted to add before I kind of tie this all together into the K-12 challenge space? I really appreciate you being here. And of course, you're welcome to stick with us through the duration here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the parting thought for me was just, I was really impressed with how far students were able to take it in a week. We had teams of students in many cases that hadn't met each other before. In some cases they had, but it was tremendous. And not only were they forming a team and figuring out how to work together, but they had a really tough problem to solve. And I was just impressed across the board with all the ideas that were generated. And so I think a lot of it is due to you, Rich, to the work that you did in helping to set it up, but also in all the work that you put together to bring in panelists from across industries to share their knowledge and inspire the students as well. So I think the more support and help and information that you can provide in something like this, the better off the result ends up being, and ultimately the experience that the students have as well.
Well, thank you so much. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the whole team at Cincinnati Innovation District. I mean, all-stars, a gem for the state, just amazing work you all are doing down there. So everybody tune in to keep following that Cincinnati Innovation District. They're already making headlines and big waves, and they'll continue to do that. So let's pull it all together here. So if you feel a little overwhelmed, then that's probably okay, because that's what innovation feels like, right? So here's a mental model, the Gartner hype cycle. When these new technologies come out, we think they're going to do everything, and then we find out they won't. So we're disillusioned, and then eventually we go up this slope of enlightenment and we figure it out. There's another model where innovation is messy. You're doing all these different innovation models and testing ideas out, and that in itself is discouraging. You put them together and it looks like a giant mess, right? Well, that's normal. I tell any students and professionals and everybody that I work with that this is very normal, and there's almost an emotional component to it, and that's okay. So what are some of the tools you can use? This is the design cycle. Some of you may be familiar with this from either past challenges or other settings. I know the OSON team has a ton of great resources both on their website, webinars they've been hosting on all these topics lately. Of course, my favorite motto is get out of the building. That's just a simple way of saying, don't just sit there and think about it in your own head. Talk to people, talk to your parents, talk to your neighbors, community members, teachers. You know, in past mobility challenges, we've had students talking to people that are responsible for food delivery at the school or student transportation, maintenance of buses. There's so many people just in your school building that you can talk to that maybe get out of the building isn't the right way to say, maybe get out of the classroom. I don't know, nothing against the classroom, but that's the mindset of just talking to users, talking to people is something we always like to encourage. Zach, anything you wanted to add on the design cycle and all those resources?
Yeah, so that's one thing, especially with a topic that we have offered that's so broad. This kind of challenge and these kind of examples provide a really good starting framework to kind of work to identify that problem. With our design challenge this year, we have the three main topics, which are kind of built infrastructure, systems, or products. So with that large blanket, this kind of air mobility issue kind of fits really well into the infrastructure built space, but also the system space. So it kind of balances between those, but provides a good targeted point to kind of start that identifying the problem section. And then these resources that Rich has been able to provide today can really provide a great context for that initial brainstorming, as well as developing some ideas within your students. But again, the most important thing is to really connect it back to your community. So it's seeing the examples that some of these other schools have developed and that some of these other students have developed, and really bringing that back to a local setting to really support and kind of assist your students in what they see as valuable at your school. So I feel like this is a really good topic that can balance a lot of things, but really push that innovative lens that the design challenge has always been about.
Yeah, I definitely encourage everybody to check out that OSLN Design Challenge website and some of the webinars and recordings and all that stuff. There's great resources there. This is one example of another resource that I've found helpful. Even just looking at even a few of these questions out there about empathy, getting in the mind of a user, asking these questions. If you want to interview somebody, you can pick even just a small set of these questions. And it's just another tool that's optional, but can be helpful. All right, so let's go lightning round here. Let's bring all this together, and I've got some examples I'm going to walk through of some maybe K-12 opportunities, but let's start with that elevator pitch as it was referenced earlier. All I did here was I took the design challenge question for the STEM Builds Ohio Challenge, and I just did a little bit of wordsmithing and dropped reimagining air mobility in there. Now, you may need to, it's an example, right? I mean, you could pick different words, but air comes to mind pretty quickly. Mobility is a good talking point for what do we mean when we say mobility. You could use different terms, but this was, the Advanced Air Mobility Drone FlyOhio equivalent of the STEM Builds Ohio Design Challenge, at least that we started with. We're wide open to other ideas. I am not a trained educator, so I respect all the work that all the teachers on this call do every single day. And, I will say, if I haven't said it already, if there's anything you've heard today that you'd like to follow up with us on, I'm glad to schedule separate follow-ups. We'll do our best to keep answering questions while we're here live today. But, it is literally my job to work with you on these kind of things. So if there's any time you want to set up a follow-up call on any of this stuff, we can help brainstorm and maybe customize something for your students, for your school, whether it's just in a single classroom, a whole building, even across a district, whatever the setting may be. So with that as maybe a starting point, I'm just going to real quick walk through a couple examples of some other resources that are more tuned for K-12 that you might be able to at least draw inspiration from, if not some direct content. Here's the first one. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, has this airport design challenge for high school. Now, I think it's all of K-12 maybe. I need to read the details. The trick with this one is it's got a real narrow window. You have to apply by November 15th, and then there's a process, and then you get some mentoring. But what's cool about it, and I'm not discouraging anybody, if you want to do it, go for it. Please, absolutely apply. I'd love to see some schools from Ohio participate, but just know that there may be some time constraints that might make it a little bit of a stretch, but by all means explore it. What I think is so cool about this, you may have deduced from the picture, they're using Minecraft to do airport design. How cool is that? So what I'm going to explore here is just when I can get some time, and I'd love everybody to crowdsource this one, is just to go check out those resources, see what's available, and maybe get some inspiration from that. Maybe you're already using Minecraft in an education setting, and this is just yet another way to apply it. So that's at least an example of some tools that are out there and some resources. And even if you don't choose to participate directly in that challenge as it's laid out, we're gonna keep working on this to try and see if we can get some of those resources available to share. Here's another case study that you may have heard about before. And this is at the 3rd grade level in Reynoldsburg in Central Ohio. They've for many years now done this Smart Reynoldsburg project that has a mixture of history, engineering, design, science, some math, a lot of different pieces to it. And so these are just a few slides that they shared with us during a different webinar. The YouTube link is shown there, and we'll make sure these slides are made available. So if you really wanted to learn more about this, you could hear directly from the educators. It was a long webinar, like an hour and a half, so you'd have to scroll to the right part, but we can get you more information if you want to learn more. But what did they do? They walked through this design cycle and they asked some questions. Last year was a little more focused on sustainability. So they went through a multi-stage process with their 3rd graders. They did some ideation there with some digital Post-it notes. A lot of this was virtual because this was done during the prior school year when everything was almost, everything was upside down. So they did their best, as we all did. And here's the platform they use, CoSpaces. So just another example of in this case, another virtual or online digital learning tool that can be used to map out different communities and layouts. And the website is listed there. I know that's a long website, so that's where we'll work with these links out later. But you can see just examples of some of the outputs. Here was what one of the students presented during that AAA webinar we did recently. Technology takes the wheel with that seminar. And then here's just some of the work the students did. So we like those as just examples, maybe inspirations for how you could use all of this. I know we're getting close to time, but let's see if we got a few more. Yeah, don't see any other chat questions that haven't already been answered, but I'm glad to open it back up for any final questions. And Zach, if you have any other thoughts you want to add, I'll just emphasize we're glad to be part of this and excited about the opportunities for the state of Ohio, and we'd love to work with all of you on some more brainstorming on this over the rest of the school year.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich. And yeah, just to state, all of the links that are on these slides will be shared after this on our Design Challenge website. Also, if you are pre-registered for this event, they will be sent directly to you by me. So look for an email probably later this week, if not early next week, with all of that information. I see Rich also just put the link to DriveOhio in the chat as well. Next week, we will be having a session regarding electric vehicle infrastructure in the state of Ohio. So if that's something that also interests you, feel free to attend that session as well. Should be some other great content around DriveOhio's bread and butter and what they've been assisting the Ohio STEM Learning Network with for the last 2 years for our transportation and electrification design challenges. So very, very excited to see where that goes as well. And yeah, happy to open up any questions. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Just today, or this week, I should say, the Ohio EPA released a call for funding for electric vehicle charging stations. So that's if you want to hear more about that next week, join us then, and we'll talk about how your students might be able to pitch ideas directly to the Ohio EPA. And I will say on all of this, we're going to do our very best to make ourselves available throughout the design challenge process. So whether that's early idea creation, we can beam into classrooms. If possible, we can do some visits if logistics and safety allow it in person. But we're glad to be part of your design challenge as much as you'd like to share these types of messages with your students, or we can share some of this content that you could share with your students. And then we can do our best to provide authentic audiences to hear your students' ideas at the end and give feedback. So yeah, that's part of our commitment to supporting this challenge.
Awesome. And not hearing anything else, we'll go ahead and call our session for today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Rich and RJ, for your great sentiments about that challenge. I feel like that's a great stepping off point for a lot of our quick K-12 educators as they look to find some new things to engage with this school year. So we'll go ahead and end it there. As I said, look forward to that meeting next week. And I hope everybody on the call has a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.